What's going on, guys? Super Insane 18 here, and today I am bringing you my ban list prediction video. And before we get into it, I do want to say that every time I make these videos, there are obviously some people who don't understand the difference between a prediction and a wish list. A prediction is what I think is actually going to happen based on the state of the game and what Konami has done in the past on previous lists, and a wish list is what I personally want. So I might not personally agree with some of the information here. This is just what I actually think is going to be done. So before you go ahead and make a comment about how I want this or I want that, that's not what this is. This isn't what I want. This is what I think is going to happen. So let's go ahead and jump on in. And to kick things off, there is the obvious elephant in the room, and that is going to be Cash Tierra Arise Heart. Honestly, this card just needs to go. We've seen that the hits that were done to this deck did absolutely nothing. This is still overwhelmingly the best deck, and honestly, Arise Heart is a problem. Not only is it a macro Cosmo on legs, but it's also a quick effect ability to just banish a card your opponent controls, and not just that, but it's always going to be able to use that effect because of its other effect to attach materials to it anytime a card is banished, not once per turn either. So you are going to be able to just stack material on top of this card, and honestly, it's just really oppressive. A lot of people compared it to something like a Zodiac Trident, and Zodiac Trident is banned, and all it does is target one card and destroy it. So the ability to banish everything and then target a card and banish it and just gain material on top of material, this card is an obvious problem, and some players are even playing things like Cyframe Lord Omega in their extra deck. That way they can banish it off Pot of Prosperity and use the effect of Arise Heart to attach the Omega to it. That way when the Arise Heart inevitably goes to grave, as long as the Omega is still a material underneath it, you're able to use the Omega to recycle the Arise Heart back into the extra deck, so it's almost like it wasn't at one anyway. So let's just go ahead and get this card banned. Cash Tierra has had enough of a reigning time period. This has been going on for 6-7 months now. This came out in February, so we're almost around 7 months. So yeah, I think that this is finally going to be the list to kill Cash Tierra, and this is the hit that needs to be done in order to do so. And for the second card that I can see Konami banning, we are going to be talking about Eradicator Epidemic Virus. We have seen way too many games recently, especially in the top cuts. If you go back and watch any YCSs or the World Championship qualifiers, you'll see that this card has just hand-ripped either 5 or 6 cards out of somebody's hand and leave them in an unplayable situation, and in certain instances like Labyrinth, it's even searchable, so this card just needs to go. It's not really balanced. I remember a time period where this card was at 1, it came back to 3, didn't really see too much play, but the way that the game is played now, this card is just absolutely problematic. Again, being able to just rip out your opponent's entire hand and leave them on 1 or 2 cards to play with while you have an established board isn't fair. Again, if we look at something like the North American World Championship qualifier, we can see that he was able to Eradicator and then leave a Arise Heart on his field. So now the opponent has 1 or 2 cards to play with, one of which is guaranteed to get banished off of the Arise Heart, and that's just not fun, that's not interactive, so let's go ahead and get this card out of here. And the next card on the chopping block has to be Dimensional Barrier. I remember when this card came out, I believe it was late 2016, and this card was problematic even way back then. Then we had Master Rule 4, which introduced Link Monsters, and this card kind of fell off because you needed Link Monsters in order to really play any sort of strategy with the way that the rules were changed to make it so that you can't summon any of your extra deck type monsters unless it's in the extra monster zone or to a zone that a Link Monster points to. That is not the case with the revisions that they made with Master Rule 5, meaning that all extra deck types aside from Pendulums and Link Monsters are now free reign again in the main monster zones, and that is why the resurgence of this card has been so heavy, especially if you're looking at top decks at the moment, which we're going to talk about, like Pearly. If you flip a Dimensional Barrier on Pearly, it pretty much is a turn skip, and nobody likes turn skips. We have several turn skips banned. There are several other turn skips that are going to be on this list as well. I don't think that turn skips are healthy for this game, and a lot of people might think, oh, well, it doesn't say Link, it doesn't need to be banned. No, that's not the case. Again, with the revision of Master Rule 5, you are able to just summon all of your extra deck type monsters to your main monster zones again. turn. So Dimensional Barrier is definitely an issue, and not just that, you're able to even search or set it off of a card like Triple Tactics Thrust. I'm guilty of it as well. I've been in a scenario where I've been hand trapped and I've gone, okay, let me go ahead and activate Thrust, set D barrier, go ahead, your turn. Oh cool, draw phase, activate card, declare whatever type you need, Synchro, Fusion, whatever, doesn't matter. Okay cool, your turn was skipped, my turn again because you weren't able to play, and now you don't have your hand trap because you used it on me last turn, and not just that, now it's turn 3 of the duel, so I can OTK you, and that's just not fun. So let's go ahead and get D barrier banned. It just needs to go at this point. And speaking of turn skips, we have Gimmick Puppet Nightmare. Now, I know Branded hasn't really been putting up a lot of results, but this is the card that should have been banned on the last ban list. Instead, they banned the Expulsion, which didn't really matter because they had just printed the Sanctifier Dragon, which is Expulsion on legs that can't be targeted, so it's just kind of insane that we still had another format of getting Puppet locked, and while it isn't that relevant at the moment, I still think that if we were to get a ban list that hit everything else, then this would become one of the top strategies, so we need to finally hit the problem card. For some reason, Konami always dances around the problem cards and they hit dumb things instead, but now I think that we've had a bit of time with the Sanctifier Dragon and they no longer need to sell that set, that it is time for the Gimmick Puppet to go. For those of you that don't know, if this is summoned, the player who controls the card when it is summoned can no longer special summon for the rest of the turn, and of course what we're doing is Branded players are able to summon this to your side of the field during your draw phase, and then you're just not able to play the game if you're playing a deck that requires special summoning. So I hope you're on Fluanderies, because if you're not, you're gonna have a bad time, and again, it's just a turn skip. Turn skips aren't healthy, they're not fun, they're not interactive. Let's go ahead and get rid of Gimmick Puppet. And obviously we have a trend of turn skips here, because next we're going to be talking about Hot Red Dragon Archfiend King Calamity. For those of you that don't know, when this card is summoned, your opponent cannot activate any cards or effects for the remainder of the turn, and they are not able to respond to that effect, and you are able to summon this during your opponent's draw phase thanks to new cards that just came out in Duelist Nexus, and that is going to be the Crimson Dragon. And you might say, well, let's just ban Crimson Dragon. I don't think that that's the answer, because Crimson Dragon is actually a really cool and interactive card, being able to swap itself out for another Synchro monster. The problem is just the Hot Red, so we're gonna go ahead and go for the problem here. Again, we don't want to really dance around the problem cards, because people will always find ways to continue to make the problems work as long as they are still legal. So we don't want to get turn skipped, we want to actually play the game. That is what we are here for. Nobody enters a tournament saying, yep, I'm just here to be here and my turn's gonna get skipped and I'm not gonna play and I'm gonna go home. That's not fun, it's not interactive, we don't want that to happen. We would rather have a back and forth, we would rather have the ability to actually play this game, because we're all here, we love this game. There's no reason that we should just have to sit there while our opponent diddles themselves for 20 minutes just to say, okay cool, your turn skipped, let's go to the next game, and yeah, let's just go ahead and ban King Calamity. And for this next card, while it's not necessarily a turn skip, it can definitely feel like that when it happens to you, depending on the deck that you are playing, and that is going to be Dimension Shifter. Dimension Shifter is able to just make it so that every single card is banished for 2 turns instead of being sent to the graveyard, and if you're on a strategy that really needs their graveyard or really needs the resources in their graveyard, this is just a bad time. There are only a handful of decks that can play this without being hindered by it, but those decks that can get a massive advantage over the opponent just by being able to activate this card, and while we have cards that can definitely out it, they're not really easy to access. Something like Call by the Grave, which is currently only at 1, it's pretty much, I have a 33% chance of drawing my Shifter, while you have a very much smaller chance of drawing your Call by the Grave, so I hope you have it, because if you don't, I'm probably just going to win this game by activating a hand trap. And again, back with everything that we've been saying so far for all of these cards, it's not fun, it's not interactive, nobody wants to sit there and get shifted and just lose because they have no way around it, and it's just one of those cards that even though I play it in certain decks, I can agree that it is very problematic and has to go. For this next card, I'm going to go ahead and give you guys a little bit of a backstory as to why I think this is going to happen. I'm not sure how long a lot of my viewers have been playing, but I have been playing this game for a very long time, and one thing that we always see is that the ban list immediately following the World Championship hits the deck that wins in some capacity, which is why I think that the card that will be banned is going to be the Hieratic Seal of Heavenly Spheres, and the reason is because this one card alone, as we saw in the World Championship Finals, will allow allow the Dragon Link player to set up a full board through a card like Nibiru, and Nibiru is obviously made to prevent your opponent from overextending and kind of equalize the playing field a little bit. Yes, they get a really big token, but that's the only thing you have to worry about. But because of the effect of Heavenly Spheres being able to summon any dragon from your deck when it is tributed, not only does it just tell you that you're not allowed to use a counter card like Nibiru on them, but even on your turn when they use the effect to spin a card, they're going to be able to summon another dragon from their deck, which could just prevent you from playing as well. A lot of times it's going to be something like Bestial Magnemite so that they can search follow-up for the next turn, but there are some degenerate cards that they can summon like the Amorphage Goliath or the what's the other one? The Amorphage Sloth, both of which tell you that you can't special summon monsters from the extra deck, and while those have fallen out of favor recently, we can't forget that they exist and the possibility of that happening is still relatively high. So again, because of the way that we've seen previous ban lists go after a World Championship, I think that Heavenly Spheres is going to be banned. There's really nothing else in the Dragon Link strategy that is super oppressive that would have to get banned anyway, so I definitely think that this is the choice to be made. Now, I know that this has been a relatively big section for being forbidden. Usually we don't see this many cards get hit, but I think that it's finally time for a crucifixion list because we haven't had one of those in a very long time, and honestly the format just needs to be shaken up. And this next card I don't personally agree with, but if we look at the results it's been putting up, I think Konami will take notice of it, and that card is Harpy's Feather Duster. Now, the reason I don't agree with this is because obviously we need some way to counteract back row strategies. Red Reboot is banned, so we don't have that, and I think that we need Harpy's Feather Duster because not only is it searchable, but it just gets rid of all of the problems. But the problem is that we've seen too many games on stream, at YCSs, at Nationals, and other big premier events where this single card has just won a game. Most famously, you might have seen the clips of Jessica Robinson activating this. I believe it was in top 4. She drew it off the top. Her face was just that of something like, oh, this is hilarious, I won the game. She activated the Harpy's Feather Duster, and her opponent just stuck out the hand to shake it, and that was the match. And I think that Konami will see that and not understand that we need this card in order to counteract those strategies. I think they're going to look at it and see it as this card is a problem, because now if you're playing a back row strategy, you auto lose, but that's not really the case, honestly. I just think that this card is a mandatory card in the game, but I can absolutely see it getting banned. And that is going to be it for the forbidden cards. Now moving on to the limited, this is a very big list as well, because once more I think that we are finally getting that crucifixion list, but not just that, I think that a lot of cards are actually going to come back that are banned because they are just no longer problematic, so that's why this is going to be such a big section. Let's go ahead and jump on in by talking about the first card on the list, and that is going to be Tierra Unicorn. Now obviously this card went to 2 on the last Forbidden Limited list, and clearly it didn't do anything, so I think that this card finally has to go to 1. Putting it to 2 made it like a 7% difference of you seeing it. I don't remember the exact math. If you go and watch my Banlist reaction, I ran the numbers, and I think it was like you had an 88% chance of seeing it, and now you have an 81% chance of seeing it. But honestly, Tierra is still undeniably the best deck. It is way too consistent, it is way too powerful, and it needs to be dropped down a peg, and I think that the way to do it is by limiting this on top of the Tierra Arise Heart ban, as well as the next 2 cards, so we're just going to talk about those all at once. Next up, we have the Tierra Birth. I think that this is just a ridiculous card. Not only is it able to non-target special summon one of your Tierras that is in graveyard or banished, but it's also able to banish resources from your opponent's graveyard if they activate a spell card. So again, it's just a little bit too many things that this card can do for you, and because it's searchable, I think that that is also a problem as well. So if we put it to 1, it kind of mitigates that usefulness of it, but yeah. Now, for the third card that we will see getting limited for Tierra, I personally don't agree with this, but unfortunately, it kind of has to happen. That is going to be Tierra Fenrir. While Tierra Fenrir is a really good card in a lot of other decks, you see people playing it in stuff like Vanquish Soul, you see people playing it in stuff like Sprite, because at the end of the day, it is just a free special summon, which can either act as a much-needed extender or as an additional interruption on your end board. I think that the fact that it is Tierra in name is a problem, and it needs to go to 1 in order to be able to just make this deck finally leave the best last deck slot. It has been far too good for far too long, and I think that just hitting it this hard, 4 hits, 1 ban, 3 limits, I think that that is what needs to happen in order to switch up the format and give us a little bit of a healthier game. Next up, we are going to talk about 3 cards back to back again, and they are actually cards for the Dragon Link strategy, but they are not specific to Dragon Link because they are played in other decks. So the reason I think that these cards will be getting limited is a combination of the fact that even at 1, they still put in a ton of work during the World Championship, but the fact that they are easily playable in other decks as well and prevent some key strategies in the game, and those are going to be Bystials. So let's go ahead and throw them all up on the board. We're talking about Magnemite, Druisworm, and Lubellion, and we're going to go over each one individually. So starting with Magnemite, this is the most important Bystial. Not only is it able to search your other Bystials or recur them from graveyard, but the problem is that it doesn't say to search a Bystial, it says to search a dragon. So if you are playing Dragon Link, you are able to just use this to get any of your cards for essentially free, and that is going back to what I was saying about Heavenly Spheres. You can summon this off of Heavenly Spheres and then search full follow-up for the next turn in the form of something like Starliege Seyfert or something like the Black Metal Dragon. You saw in the World Championship qualifier that that is exactly what happened. Paulie was going to end on a rather mediocre board of Heavenly Spheres with a Bystial Lubellion and the Regained or the Branded Beast, and his opponent made the call to Nibiru on the Spheres, and that allowed him to use Spheres to summon out a Seyfert, and if summoning a Seyfert is a problem, searching a Seyfert is a problem. So the Bystial Magnemite probably needs to go to 1 just to kind of cut down that consistency. Moving on to the Bystial Druisworm, this card is just a get out of jail free card. You are able to summon it, and when it goes to the graveyard from the field, you are able to target a special summon monster your opponent controls and sends it to the graveyard. Not only does that get around destruction protection because it sends it, but it's a little bit too easy to just get out of otherwise problematic monsters, and you might be thinking, oh, well, if a monster's problematic, you probably should have an out. This is a little too easy. It's searchable by multiple cards, and it's just way too easy to put on the field, especially because you're able to use it as 1, a quick effect if your opponent controls any monsters, and 2, to banish any light or dark from either graveyard. If it was a little bit more limited and said only the opponent's graveyard or only your graveyard, then it might not be as big of a problem, but it is because of just how versatile it can actually be. Finally, we are going to be talking about Lubellion. This is the searcher for all of your Bystials. You can discard it to add any of your Bystials from your deck to your hand, but that's not the only thing that it does. It also tributes a level 6 or higher dragon to summon itself from the graveyard and then activate one of your branded continuous spells or traps. In most cases, it's going to be either the Branded Beast or the Branded Regained. Both of those cards are very powerful in their own right, and I think that this card needs to go to 1 as well. And you might be thinking that this is hitting it too hard, but Dragon Link literally won Worlds with all of these cards limited to 1, so I don't think that it is necessarily too harsh of a hit if this were to happen, but I think if you do this in combination with the ban of Spheres, then it definitely brings that deck down a peg. Next up, we have Big Welcome Labyrinth, and this is honestly the only card that I think really needs to be hit in Labyrinth. Well, not the only card in Labyrinth, but the only card that is Labyrinth in name. Honestly, I'm not personally scared of any of the Labyrinth archetype cards. You might have heard me say that in a video before, but the deck is putting up a lot of results. Personally, the cards that I am more afraid of are the non-engine trap cards, which we're going to talk about immediately after this, but I think that something needs to be done in order to just slow down Labyrinth as a whole, and Big Welcome is probably the better one to hit just because of how versatile it is. I don't really want to talk too much about it because I don't think that Labyrinth is really a problem. Again, it's those non-engine traps, but yeah, I can definitely see Konami limiting Big Welcome. But onto the card that definitely needs a hit more than Big Welcome, that is going to be Skill Drain. There is no reason on God's green earth that this card should have ever come back to 3. This card is absolutely a problem. For the cost of 1,000 life points, you can win the duel, and I just think that this card is ridiculous. If you don't have a out for it, you're probably just gonna lose. They're able to put up 3k beaters, 2900 attack beaters, and just sit under a skill drain because you can't do anything. And it's not even just Labyrinth. I've seen people side this in Dragon Link because, again, they just put up massive attack beaters and tell you, haha, you can't activate any monster effects, and it's just a little ridiculous. There's no reason that this card should have ever come to 3. When playing against Labyrinth, this is honestly the only card that scares me, so let's go ahead. We need to put this back down to 1. Skill Drain is absolutely absolutely a problem. We're going to talk about these next two cards at the same time because they are again part of the same strategy. That is going to be Runic Fountain and Runic Tip. Be honest with me, guys, do any of you really enjoy playing Runic? I mean, it's not really that broken in concept, being able to activate your quick plays from your hand, but the broken part is definitely Fountain, being able to recur 3 of your cards and draw 3 cards. That's absolutely insane. Not only can that get you into additional Runics that you can just activate for free from your hand, but it can also get you into hand traps and its recursion and its just card advantage. And honestly, this card feels kind of like a custom card, being able to just put 3 on the bottom of your deck and draw 3 at any point during either turn. Card really needs to go, and that is why we are also putting Tip to 1, because if you put the Fountain to 1, then obviously you still have search access to it by any of your spell cards, because any of your spell cards can summon the Hugin and you can search it, but one of these searching cards is going to be Tip as well, so I think that if you're going to hit one, you have to hit the other, just to kind of really lower the consistency. We saw Fountain go to 2, and it's done absolutely nothing. Every time I sit down across from a Runic player, it just feels like even if I win, the game wasn't fun. It wasn't interactive. It's just, honestly, these cards need to go, and there's not really much else I have to say on it. And that is going to be it for the problematic cards that I think need to receive a limit that are not currently limited. Let's talk about some cards that are banned and I think should be coming back to 1. First of which is going to have to be Glow Up Bulb. Now, this card is one of the forgotten tuners that for some reason didn't come back with the banning of Crystron Halqifibrax, and I think it's time. We have a lot more broken cards in the game, other than something that can special summon itself once per duel, might I add, by sending the top card of your deck to graveyard. I think that Glow Up Bulb is a really fun card to play and really interactive in certain strategies, being able to either A, just put an additional monster on board, or B, use it to synchro or link climb. And I think that when Halqifibrax got banned, they started bringing back the tuners, and for some reason this was just forgotten. Let's go ahead and put it back to 1. Next up, we have Perform Mage Plushfire, and some of you who were around for the Pepe format and the emergency ban might be thinking that this is crazy of me to say that this can come back, but I have a reason for thinking Konami will do so, and that is that we are receiving a ton of pendulum support. We have, I forget the name of it, but it's essentially the bigger beyond the pendulum, and I think that they still want to try and push the pendulum strategy a little bit, and what better way to do it with Plushfire. Again, this is one of those cards that, while really broken back in the day, when you look at it now, it really doesn't sound all that broken. Let me ask you guys, do you think that it's broken to summon a Perform Mage from your deck when this card is destroyed? We have things that do a lot more broken things than that, and I just think that this card is one of those cards that, yes, back in the day was really, really broken and very much deserved the ban, but right now, with the way that power creep has happened in the game of Yu-Gi-Oh!, this can probably come back and nobody would bat an eye. Now, this next pick might be a little bit controversial, but I can absolutely see it happening. Now, a lot of people were theorizing that the reason this card was banned was because you couldn't really sell a product that you needed commons out of, and that card is going to be Super Heavy Samurai Scarecrow. With the release of Cyberstorm Axis, we saw incredible support for the Super Heavy Samurai strategy, and it felt very short-lived because a week and a half to 2 weeks later, they banned Super Heavy Samurai Scarecrow. And while I've shown in several videos that that was not a death sentence, it definitely wasn't good for the deck. We've seen a lot of players move away from the strategy, and it hasn't put up any big tournament results since, and I think that the hit was just a little bit too preemptive. And like I said, a lot of people were theorizing that it was because all of the support was in the form of common cards, and we have to admit, sometimes the ban list is used more as a way to sell product than it is to ensure the healthiness of the game, and I think that that was one of the things that they did in order to ensure that they were making some money, was if they get rid of the deck that only needs commons, it incentivizes people to play the higher rarity strategies, which causes them to buy product, because let's be honest, you could probably just walk up to anybody at Sneak Peek and say, hey, can I get that common? And they're probably going to give it to you. So I think that that was what happened here, and now that it's put up no results and they no longer need to sell that set, I think we can see this card coming back to 1 just to kind of diversify the format and give us more options to play. And again, I don't think that this card is overwhelmingly unhealthy. I think that it just allows us another deck to play, so I can see it coming back to 1. Next up, we have the Forgotten Nightmare, and that is going to be Nightmare Goblin. Honestly, guys, do we care about an additional normal summon in 2023? That's pretty much all that this card does, and it has to be an additional normal summon to a zone that this card points to, so you can't just splash it into a deck, summon it in the extra monster zone, and then get another normal summon. You have to actually be able to summon it in your main monster zone, meaning that you've already committed resources to a link monster that points down to your side of the field anyway, and with how many times people can special summon in a turn these days, I think that an additional normal summon won't break the game. I don't think that you can really compare this to something like Seraph Knight from Gem Knights, because with that, you have Brilliant Fusion, and not only does that just put a monster out for free by activating Brilliant Fusion, but it also sends cards from your deck to the graveyard, which can give you additional resources as well, so that's a little bit more broken than something like Nightmare Goblin. Nightmare Goblin just committing it bare minimum 3 resources for a link 1 that points down, and then 2 monsters to go into the Nightmare Goblin to make it point to your side of the field in the main monster zone. Just for another normal summon, I think that that's really slow and probably gives some other decks playability, but the decks that really are good right now wouldn't even play it anyway, so let's go ahead and test the waters. I can absolutely see Nightmare Goblin coming back. Up next is the Simorgh Bird of Sovereignty. Now, this card was banned because a lot of people were using it to do degenerate things, like summon out the Barrier Statue of the Stormwinds, but with Barrier Statue of the Stormwinds banned, the best thing that you can probably summon off of this is something like a Mist Valley Apex Avian, and committing 3 monsters to make this and then have a Omni Negate is, again, kind of a little slow, so I can definitely see that being something that can come back, because without the Stormwinds, it's not an immediate win button like it used to be. You're not putting out a monster that says, haha, you can't play the game, and I think that that is just reason enough for it to come back on its own. And for the final card in the limited section, we are going to be talking about Orchest Harp Horror. We have seen a trend of them slowly bringing back the Toss or Eternal format decks. We have Salamandrate support coming out, we've had Engage slowly being lifted off of the list, and the next deck on the list to come back would have to be Orchest, and I think that the way to do that is bring back the Harp Horror. It's the only card that's really hit on their list anyway, so yeah, and obviously we can't really bring back Thunder Dragon, because Thunder Dragon Colossus is just a very, very obnoxious and oppressive card, so the best way to continue the trend of bringing back the Eternal format would be to bring back Orchest Harp Horror. I don't think that this really breaks the deck, even if you were to put it to 3, but in typical Konami fashion, we have to test the waters first, so let's go ahead and put it at 1. Moving on to the semi-limited section, I am a big believer that this section is nearly useless, so we will not be having any cards that will be changed in the semi-limited. Well, there are cards that will be changed, but we don't want to put anything too semi-limited, just to kind of give you guys a little bit of a background as to why I think so. Putting a card at 2 doesn't really make a difference consistency-wise, as we saw with Nightmare Unicorn on the last list, so I don't think that there are a lot of cards that belong in this section. However, this section is still important for certain cards. When you look at cards like Destiny Hero Malicious or Zodiac Rapier, those are cards that are very, very abusable at 3, but unplayable at 1, so I think cards of a similar nature belong in this list, but at the moment there really aren't any cards. Maybe you can say put Rapier back to 2, but without Barrage and Dryden, I don't think that Zodiac is even remotely playable anyway, other than a Zeus simulator, so there aren't really going to be any changes here, but I did just want to kind of talk about the semi-limited and what my opinion on that section of the list is anyway, so let's move on to the Unlimits. Now, this is already a long video, so we're just going to kind of rush through the Unlimits, because honestly, these are cards that just have no business being on the list anymore anyway, so we're going to start things off with Herald of Orange Light. This card came back to 2, didn't really see any competitive success. Cool, Drivetron players now have another monster negate, and that's really about it, so let's go ahead and put this to 3. Next up, we have Lightning Storm. Because of the prediction of the Harpy's Feather Duster ban, I think that we at least need a way to counteract back row strategies, and Lightning Storm, it can be argued it is way more fair than something like Feather Duster, just because it has the stipulation of you needing to control no face-up cards, so you pretty much have to start your turn with it. If you draw it later on in the game, it's not going to be a blowout unless your board was wiped, so let's go ahead and put that back to 3 as well. Next up, we have the Pot of Desires. This card went to 2. I don't think it was on the last list. I actually think it was a couple lists ago. I don't really remember. People aren't really playing it anyway other than niche strategies, so let's go ahead and put it back to 3. Banishing 10 cards to draw 2. Not really that great, honestly. I mean, some people might argue, oh, well, it says draw 2, it's an incredible card. but 9 times out of 10, I would rather use something like Pot of Prosperity to pick a guaranteed card that I want out of the top 6 than see 2 random cards. So Pot of Prosperity or Pot of Desires can definitely come back without an issue. Next up, we have the Red Rose Dragon. It's just one of the forgotten tuners from the Halki-Fibrax days. I don't know why this is still at 1, let's just put it to 3. And finally, we have the Gazelle. There's no reason that this card should be limited anymore, and they just released a ton of Salamangrate support, so what better time to put this back to 3 than now, and that is going to be it for the Unlimits. And there you guys have it. That is going to be my ban list prediction video. I know that it was a long one, so thank you to those of you that have stuck around and waited till the end. I just want to say that I think we are finally going to get the crucifixion list that we desperately need in order to shake up this game. And if you guys think that something else might get banned or that I missed something, just be polite about it in the comments. Again, this is not a wish list, this is a prediction. So I just wanted to go over what I can reasonably see happening. If you guys want a wish list, maybe I'll make a wish list video. Again, let me know that in the comments down below, but you guys know the deal. If you liked it, make sure to subscribe, hit the notification bell, like, comment, share with your friends, maybe consider supporting me on Patreon. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.